meeting to order, and we can see when Melvin chimes in, and we'll open it up for him also. So because we are hybrid, we will do a roll call vote if we have to do any never mind this one, but if we had to vote on everything, it would have to be a roll call vote. Since it's hybrid. And so present, we have John Allen, Bill Dwyer, John Silvestro, Sally Lanowski.
Yep.
And Mary Carney is on Zoom, as is Patricia Lloyd. And we will be waiting for Melvin to join us also. Absent tonight is Molly Egan, and Mike will not, Mason will not be joining us tonight either. His son has his football banquet, so something to have their priorities, which is perfectly fine.
Will David Bill?
Oh, and David Phil, where are you, David Phil? I don't know. I sent him all the minutes and stuff. There was a meeting last night. Well, we'll mark him absent for now, and unless he chimes in, and then we'll go from there. I should have sent him a text message, I guess. So can I have an approval of the minutes from last week that Mary did send us? Did everybody get them?
Yep.
Okay, so that worked okay. I did something right.
Do we approve the minutes?
Okay.
Second.
November.
Second by John Allen. Roll call vote. John?
Aye.
Bill?
I'm the alternate.
You're the alternate. Okay. Joyce, yes.
Go ahead.
John, yes. Sally, yes. Mary?
Yes.
So all approved. Thank you. Old business review of previous materials, department head meeting. As I previously said, that did not happen, but it will be happening on December 13th. When I went into town hall, I did find that out today, so Molly will be bringing some of these things back to the department head meeting. I had met the new HR person, Lauren, and she very much would like to know more about the FOG meeting and what her interaction would be with the administrator, so we can look forward to her wanting to participate in any of our future meetings. Acting town administrator, look over materials, and we don't have him here tonight to do that, so.
Is the search for a new town administrator sort of on hold?
No, they're moving forward.
Oh, there?
Yeah, they have, they did I don't know what last night's meeting brought, but they were going to have,
They have
a
contract
contract.
in the hands of town council.
Okay, so they have somebody that they're looking at.
That's all, yeah.
So you know more than I do.
All I know is what was announced
Last night?
Yeah.
Okay, so that's good to know. So they have somebody that they're looking at, and I guess we'll go from there. Depending on what we do here and what, I'm sure that it might be in the contract that her job duties might change if these materials change from bylaw to charter or whatever. So I guess we'll have to wait and see. I guess I should have got on that meeting last night, but I don't know where I was, to tell you the truth. All right, so we'll continue on. Concept of power of appointment. Slash HR. So that was something we were gonna discuss about, the appointment of people, whether it was gonna be an administrator or the HR, they're gonna be working together. So I think the concept is that they would be working together with the administrator being the person that I think we're looking to give her more power. Did you get a call back yet from Melvin?
I haven't. We actually had divided up a little bit what we were going to talk about tonight. So I am happy to go through the memo that we wrote. I've never had him not show up like this, so I'm hopeful that he's, either in traffic and not having some sort of a technology problem. But, I'm happy to start with the memo,
Okay.
that we sent, on Monday. I can either share that and go through it with you. Would that be helpful?
Yeah.
That'd be great.
If you want to just look along, if you all have a copy of it.
We all have a copy of it. So why don't you go ahead and tell us what the review of the executive branch and how it might affect us and what you had. in this-
Absolutely. And Mel was going to discuss some specifics about Hadley and compare them to South Hadley and Harvard. And as I said, I have no idea where he is, but I want to go through some of the decision points that you'll be looking at. When the interim town administrator is available, it will be very helpful to have him chime in on these duties. We definitely have taken a look at what you have for a bylaw and the information that you have. However, it's going to vary from what actually happens in practice. So it will be really helpful to hear from him.
I was asked to give a date on when we might want him. I'm going to say December 19th, right? That's our next meeting,
Okay.
the 19th.
Okay, well, we'll talk, we can talk after this meeting about whether we'll be here about that. And obviously, if Mel's not here today, we'll make sure that he can make your next meeting. But I'm hopeful he'll show up. But in any event, it will be helpful to find out from him exactly how it works in Hadley, in order to compare it with South Hadley. We do have some materials from South Hadley and from Hadley about your org chart that Mel's planning to present. But in the meantime, the memo that we gave you, we talked a little bit about, it's very brief because we really intend to go into detail and hear from you what you're looking for. I think that the goal, of this meeting and maybe the next meeting is to have you come up with, between you and the interim town administrator and the select board, have you come up with some suggestions for changes you might want to make to the system? And then we can put it together into draft language and start to have you actually look at what some new language might be. But let me just start with talking a little bit about the executive branch in the town meeting form of government. And as we mentioned, it's vested in an elected board of selectmen or a select board. The select board their duties are spelled out throughout Massachusetts general law. So there's not just one place. They are listed as the agent on many of the town's duties, including things like calling town meetings, calling for elections, preparing a budget, making appointments, approving licenses. So they're in scores of places throughout Mass general laws. But their duties, many of their duties can be assigned to a town administrator, and that's under Mass General Law, Chapter 41. A town can determine whether the select board, what roles they might wish to share with a town administrator, and whether those duties are shared by other elected boards or whether the town administrator will be handling those duties. So the town administrator was established by Chapter 41, Section 23A. The town is allowed to create the position. While it has complete discretion to assign the administrator these matters, there are some duties that, if assigned to the town administrator, would require a special act or a charter to enact. Essentially, while you can also create a bylaw, and you do have a bylaw that helps with define the town administrator's roles, it's fairly vague. It doesn't give a lot of specific authority to the town administrator. So the authority still remains with the select board. So in order to change your bylaw, if you were just looking to make a bylaw change, The bylaw would be passed by town meeting and then reviewed by the Attorney General. If the bylaw changes were so significant, if it was taking significant statutory powers away from the select board, maybe changing certain board duties, et cetera, then it would require a special act or charter to enact those changes. But just talking in general, your town administrator position was adopted under the general bylaws. It gives the position's qualification, term of office, duties, responsibilities. In broad terminology, we would call it a weak town administrator. That doesn't mean your town administrator is weak. It just means that their authority is somewhat limited. There's more authority that is still resting with the select board. It hasn't been transferred to the town administrator to make certain decisions. So,
A question?
yes,
It seems to me that one of the first and perhaps critical question to ask is, do we want to opine on that question? How much authority the selectmen retain and how much the town administrator will pick up?
that is part of your scope. And that is definitely something that you will be considering. So, as we go along, we're going to talk about some decision points and give you some places to opine on these things. And while you're considering this, it's probably best to also be including the interim town administrator in the process. Also, I understand that, one of your members will be talking to department heads. Department heads are going to be a great resource for decisions about, for at least approaching them and understanding how things are done. For example, if they're used to reporting to the town administrator on things, if they report to their independent board, or if they're reporting to the select board, how is their reporting structure working for them? And are they looking to make a change? And is the select board looking to make a change? Is the town administrator looking to make a change? So this is where it'll be really important to hear your individual needs. So you absolutely will be opining on these things. One of the decisions you're going to make, as we talked about, is deciding how much authority the select board is sharing with the town administrator. If you've looked at the South Hadley Special Act, the Harvard Charter, other acts, some of these things you're going to be looking at are appointing authority, personnel management, contracting, responsibility for town property and facilities, budget preparation. So we really, and I wish Mel were here because, I'm a little worried about him because he hasn't responded to my text either. So I'm hoping that everything's okay with him tonight. But because he planned to talk about what we've seen it'll be easier to talk to someone on the ground, but we also have the org charts for Hadley and the other, and we can compare and contrast. It does not tell us exactly, a lot of what is going on is probably based on loose agreements. How have things been done? Rather than what's been formalized in the org chart or the bylaw. So we're going to want to talk about these in more detail. But one of
Would-
John,
I have a question.
question for you.
Would you generally agree that across Massachusetts, in towns comparable to Hadley's form of government, town meeting, select board, town administrator, that there is a movement, a clear movement toward a stronger town administrator position?
Yes, there is. There's a movement towards centralization. It's very rarely going the other direction. I can't think of a case where it's going another direction. Some people feel that some towns are finding that decentralization still works for them. Having, for having certain employees report to certain boards as opposed to through one source. It's working for some cities and towns. But for those who want changes, the change is definitely in the direction of a stronger executive, a stronger town administrator or town manager. And just to take a moment, I'm sure you'll hear the terms town manager, town administrator, sometimes executive director or executive assistant. It used to be historically probably the least amount of authority resided in an executive assistant or executive director. And then it went to town administrator, and then town manager would seem to have a higher level authority. But currently, there's really no difference in the terms. Duties are assigned usually under a special act or charter, and these terms are used interchangeably. So you don't necessarily have to change the title in order to change the duties, just to understand. You'll see when you look at different charters, some are called town manager, some are called town administrator, but the more important decision is what kind of authority they have. So what I am hoping to do tonight is hear from you, because we want to hear your thoughts on this. But you'll also be checking in. We understand you'll also be checking in with departments and the interim town administrator for their thoughts as well. But we're hoping that you can. I want to go through. We have several decision points or bullet points at the end of the memo, and so I want to talk to you a little bit about each one of them, and maybe you can talk amongst yourselves about the impressions, like, why are you here? What are you hoping to accomplish and change? Or at least, what do you want to look into? What do you think might be an issue worth looking into? So we can focus on those and maybe come up with some alternatives and draft language. So let's start with the first one, which is department head and staff appointing authority. Currently, it appears that your select board is really involved in all of the appointments of boards, committees, employees, department heads, etc. And the town administrator certainly is involved in gathering resumes, helping make decisions and prioritizing candidates, but the decision-making power rests with the select board. There's different levels of appointment authority that you can choose. You can absolutely find out how this is working for you. How is this working for the select board? Do they find this task to be something that they're able to do in the time that they have? How is this working for employees? Are you getting enough candidates when they're being exposed to the full select board scrutiny, or would they prefer a more private vetting of their applications just through the town manager or the town administrator? So those are some things that you want to look at. I'm interested in, before we go to, oftentimes kind of a midway point is perhaps the select board will be more involved in appointing department heads, and the town administrator would have much more authority in appointing staff. With, essentially department heads would be appointing the staff with the support of the town administrator. So, that's kind of a next step. In some cities and towns, the town administrator has complete appointing authority without select board confirmation. But it sounds to me that that might be a pretty big jump for Hadley. So maybe we can just hear your thoughts. I'd love to hear what you're thinking, how it's working, if you've experienced, you're here now, so have you experienced any difficulty with the current appointment processes?
Better than
Well, personally, I think, if we have a stable person in the HR department. I think, we've gone through 3 now. So I think it's, 3, right?
We're on number 4.
Are we on number 4 now? I've lost count, Bill.
Yes, we're on number 4.
Number 4. So to me, that would be the person, going through basically the hiring process when a request has come in for a DPW director, or if a chief retires, or getting the process going. And then starting that process with the administrator, almost like piggybacking on it. I think, to me, it looks like they should be the ones to start the process and then bring it back to the select board. In the past, we've set up a committee, the select board, on hiring the chiefs, going through an interview process, because I had been on both of those. So they're not so much the administrator was involved with that at that point. So then the pick was brought back to the administrator and to the select board, and then they would, go through that process.
Yeah.
So, I mean, did anybody have any other ideas on, how that should work?
It seems to me that the really important thing be to define what the select board is supposed to do, what the department heads is supposed to do, and what the town administrator is supposed to do. And somewhere in there, there's this human relations person. Now, that's 4 groups of people. They can't all be doing the same thing.
Well, that's why I'm saying that you would probably have it start, well, you can take your pyramid and look at it and just kind of get a gist of, actually who reports to who. You've got the select board reporting to the town administrator and the departments, boards, committees. So that's where that's outlined. Because I think if you take a look, oh, hi Mel. We can glad you were able to make it. You have a little rough ride tonight. Can you hear us? Oh,
Yes, I can hear you. Can you hear me?
we can hear you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining us, so we can mark you present, Mary. So we're just looking at the organizational sheet here that we have. And they went over that last night at the select board meeting. Did you see that also, Bill? Were you watching?
They did not do the piece on service delivery plan.
Okay,
That was not ready to go.
okay, all right. So that's basically what we're looking at right now, Mel, is the select board and who reports to who. I was just looking to see where HR is in this, and I don't see HR here.
Yeah, sort of under departments, under the town administrator.
Okay,
There are 2 charts here. I'm not sure, there are minor differences between the 2,
yeah,
but they're not exactly the same.
yeah, this is what they gave us, so I'm not sure either. I'd like a little bit more definitive.
So I think the top one is, the one that's not in color is a little more accurate. At least.
Okay.
Select board, the town administrator, department, and
Boards and
boards and
committees.
commissions really should be at the same level as departments.
Okay. So we're just talking about, Mel, about what Pat had sent us, and going over decision points.
Excuse me.
And we're just talking about department head and staff appointing authority. So basically, John, do you have anything you wanted to add to that?
I guess as a general principle, I would support where a position is a higher level position that has more supervisory control over larger numbers of employees. In that case, I would advocate for greater select board involvement in the final hiring decisions. But probably for a preponderance of hires, I would prefer to see the HR person and the town administrator having a more significant role.
Mhm. Yeah. Any thoughts, Sally, on that for you?
I don't know, I'm sort of torn because, I think with a town administrator whose role is to sort of oversee everything and with a competent HR director, it seems to me that it's sort of it feels like it's jumping a level to have the select board have to be heavily involved in all the hirings. That said, I know there are a lot of departments that have to, sort of be hopefully there's not a lot of turnover there, but
Mhm.
and my guess is the town administrator is working with the department heads more than the select board, but I might be wrong in that assumption.
No, it's true. I mean, we're liaison to, the select board has their own
Yeah,
committees that they're liaison to.
right.
But they don't make any decisions. They usually bring it back to the whole board.
Yeah, because if the town administrator is full-time,
Mhm.
I'm sort of wondering, what do they do in this full-time job? And that's just my naivety, perhaps.
Mhm. So you'd like a little more description on what the administrator does,
Yeah, I mean, I've seen the job description, but
day-to-day operation.
it just feels like a lot of the work, it goes back up to the select board, which is part-time and elected.
Mhm.
And I know how busy everybody is.
Mhm.
It seems like that if you have a full-time person working with a good HR director, who can make recommendations or get the input of the select board,
Mhm.
that may be more efficient.
This whole thing has evolved over time.
Yeah,
And it initially, way back when I was a selectman, it was around the Methuselah, I think, but the select board chose what was then called a circuit rider, which was funded by a state grant. And it was just to take some of the administrative load off the
Mhm.
part-time board of
Mhm.
selectmen. And it was there was no way part-time selectmen,
mhm,
which were only 3 at the time, by the way, could actually do what they thought they were going to do, which is run a town. You just can't do it with dozens of employees and dozens of laws to
Mhm.
comply with, and on and on and on. And especially on a part-time basis, and especially without any background in it.
mhm.
And so that's how it evolved. It was just a circuit rider, and then it gradually became to whatever actually a pretty effective town administrator. And now we're trying to, are we trying to just conceptualize it and be able to write it down instead of it just sort of evolving the way it evolved?
Mhm.
Well, we were involved with also as a board of selectmen disciplinary. So if
Mhm.
somebody
Yeah, but-
had a disciplinary event,
We-
it also came before us also where we didn't have an HR person.
Mhm.
And that HR person now would take care of
Mhm.
that.
Exactly,
Yeah.
Joyce.
Yes.
Exactly.
So those things have evolved,
Mhm.
to the
Yeah.
goodness.
Yeah, yeah.
The thing that struck me, and it was not that long ago, but a department head brought the name of a new hourly worker before the board of selectmen, and the selectmen voted to accept that person. Now, none of the selectmen knew they had probably ever met the hourly worker, much less had the responsibility of making sure the person was compatible with the rest of the crew.
Yeah.
And yet,
Mhm.
that's how,
Mm.
it seemed like it was incongruous to me.
Yeah. Okay, where we going now, Pat? Did Melvin want to come on and share what he had with us? Do we want to stop at this point, or we want to continue on with the decision points?
I think that, I think would be just, Mel, I went through the memo and we were starting into the decision points. But I think that Mel's, comparison of towns is gonna be really helpful as we talk about these decision points. So it might be a good idea for him to, jump in here.
That sounds good.
Thank you. I apologize for being a bit late this afternoon. I think, as we talk about organization charts, every organization has one. But the level of discussion that you're having this evening, which were also identified by Pat in her memo talking about decision points, are very hard to capture in an organization chart, frankly. And so what I did as a trying to get a handle on what's really happening with the executive and administrative functions, I broke it down and I looked at South Hadley and Harvard, which are, I believe, the two communities that you had identified as possibly examples that you wanted to model or at least take a look at. Having said that, let me just go back a bit to the organization chart. So, every community, small community, a town in Massachusetts is structured similarly in that there's a number of independently elected bodies that the voters elect, or officials like a town clerk or treasurer. And that can vary for different towns. And I'm not suggesting we're going to go there and look at that, but that is a difference between many communities, is how many independently elected bodies there are. Because the more they have, that flatter that organization becomes, and the less control that there is in the central executive and administrative functions. But having said that, I wanted to look at the executive and administrative functions and the decision points that Pat raised. So if I could, can I share the screen that I have?
Yes, please.
Let me see if I can get this up here. Bear with me for one moment.
I would need more than one moment. Not computer savvy at all.
Plugging along on that, I just want to jump back a little bit. The sort of the opinion point, the decision points, the only really articulated one that I've heard has been staffing from the select board members. Now, Molly did say that there were some other things going on, but she didn't really get into a lot of detail about that. It's always just the staffing and reporting responsibilities. So it would be helpful maybe to hear more from David and Molly on why they consider that. I have not heard the other points raised as an issue. Although they do illustrate another problem and to your point, Sally, that's what the town administrator is supposed to be doing.
Right.
And it has overwhelmed, eventually ended up overwhelming all of our town administrators. There's just too much to do for one person.
Are you able to see the screen at this point?
Yeah.
Okay. So I think, you talked about the staffing. And so the second box there is the department head and staff appointments. And I'd like to I picked out relevant.
Make it a little bit larger.
Sure.
Yeah. We're all like.
I just.
Yeah.
Okay,
Does that work a little better?
Yep.
better.
Yep.
Okay. So this is the second box down, which is referred to as the appointments of department heads and staff. In Hadley, your bylaw, which is chapter 6 of the bylaws, it says the town administrator assists in the recruitment and selection of department heads and employees by making recommendations to the select board. And so I think you've probably have evolved. I know you have an HR function. And perhaps things are different, but this is what exists in your bylaws. So by law, the select board is responsible for making the appointments. The town administrator assists in that process. I want you to go over to Hadley, South Hadley, I should say, and you'll see a much different variation. While the select board does appoint the town council, the town administrator appoints everyone else, all the other department heads. Now, with the case of the police chief, the DPW superintendent, and the town accountant, that appointment is subject to the approval of the select board. But the town administrator then appoints and removes all other department heads that aren't under the jurisdiction of elected bodies. So that could be, a lot of the finance and administrative functions. And in South Hadley, the department heads are appointing and removing the subordinate employees, assistant department heads, subject to approval of the town administrator, except for elected bodies, of course, the school committee and some of the other elected boards. So you see quite a difference there. Now, perhaps the select board in Hadley has delegated the town administrator to make all the way 2 recommendations, but that is not articulated in the bylaw. The bylaw gives full discretion to the select board, whereas in South Hadley, it's written in the special act specifically these details. So Harvard is more like Hadley, where the town administrator is making recommendations to the select board, and the select board are making the appointments. So let me stop there and ask if you have any questions about how that works, or if you have any thoughts about that.
Harvard is a charter.
Yeah, Harvard has a charter. South Hadley has a special act, which I call like a mini charter. It's really just related to the select board and the town administrator responsibilities.
Okay. Any, Alex?
Just from an employee and the department head perspective, that's okay, Joyce.
Yes.
Does South Hadley have like an appeals process? Say, there's a termination that's maybe unjust, not saying that the select board would hire someone like that, but just in case something does happen, did South Hadley have a appeals process for stuff like that?
I think that would be through the HR, wouldn't it, Mel?
It's likely that there is a sort of a grievance and procedure. Department, it depends, and also if the employee is a member of a collective bargaining unit, and there are certain rights there. But if you're talking about an at-will employee, a management employee, it's unlikely that they have an appeal to an entity. You might have a process, but for example, in the South Hadley situation, let's say the town administrator hired a finance director, and the town administrator wanted to dismiss or remove that department head. I don't believe that is appealable to the select board in this case. So in the case of South Hadley, the town administrator is given a certain level of independent responsibility for department heads. Joyce, do you have a thought about that? Yeah, I know you're heavily into the HR area.
It's I'm feeling like the
Or
HR
Pat, I meant to say Pat. Do you have Pat? Do you have a thought about appeals of a town administrator's appointments in these cases, or dismissals?
Oftentimes there are internal processes that that go through HR. Each city and town have set them up. Some have set up some specific grievance procedures. Usually they're rather vague, report things to HR. And then HR will decide if it's something they're going to investigate further. It's really varied, depends on the reasons and the kinds of concerns that are involved. And as Mel said, there may be collective bargaining agreements that involve a grievance process. And oftentimes, cities and towns have somewhat of an informal process that mirrors the collective bargaining process, so that there may be steps for appealing, not necessarily a formal appeal, but places to go to when there are those concerns.
Does that answer your question, Alex?
A little bit, yeah.
Anybody else have any thoughts on it?
The other thing I would say, Joyce and the committee, is that a select board is subject to the open meeting law. And there are matters that can go into executive session, although employees have rights, and they can demand that an employment matter be done in public session. Those are really very awkward situations. Any time a person is going for a job, I mean, can you imagine if you were applying for a job and your interview was public, or there were questions that were asked that really were better suited for a more individual type of a meeting or an interview? That's one of the reasons why you'll find communities vest the appointment and some of the HR functions with a town administrator who is not subject to the open meeting law. These interviews between the town administrator and various employees are all private. The name becomes public when it's being proposed to the select board, but that is one of the main reasons I find that the HR functions and the appointment activities tend to be vested in an individual who is not subject to the open meeting law.
That chart that you had up there, could you send that to me so I could disperse it to the other members?
Yeah, it's been a work in progress, but definitely we're going to clean it up and we're going to share it with all the other members of the committee.
Okay.
But
then we could have the copy in front of us, and I think we would have and having looked at it, and even if you added something to it afterwards, at least we would have the basic one that you have.
Sure.
Okay.
Are there any other areas of administrative functions you want to take a look at?
Anybody have any thoughts? What else they want to go with?
We have supervision, budget preparation, some personnel management. Why don't we go to personnel management, since this is somewhat related? So in the Hadley bylaw, again in 6.3, the town administrator exercise general supervision over the personnel, organization, systems, and practices of the select board office, which I find interesting that it does not discuss a more broader supervision over the personnel system. It's possible that the select board delegate more, but in the bylaws anyway, it's not discussed in that manner. And the town administrator assists the select board in the collective bargaining process, also provision of the bylaws. If you look over to the right with South Hadley, here the town administrator has the ability to organize, consolidate, or establish departments or positions under their jurisdiction with select board approval. And the town administrator develops a personnel system, including determination of compensation, training, and so on. And also the town administrator negotiates collective bargaining contracts on behalf of the select board. Again, they are approved by the select board, but the work of the town administrator in this case is laid out specifically in the special act, whereas in Hadley, very general and really subject to how the select board wishes to have its town administrator assist them in their executive functions.
I have a question. In South Hadley currently, does the town administrator have a staff, an assistant, or someone to help with some of these duties, these responsibilities?
I believe so, yes.
They're a little bit bigger than we are.
Yeah, right.
For South Hadley, but I know in negotiations years ago, it was a select board member would be on the negotiating team, whether it would be police, or or DPW. Those were the only two unions that we had up until this year. And now we have fire and we have, town employees, are in a union now too. So now there are four, unions that the administrator would have to deal with at this point instead of just two. And I think the new ones are just for a year, I think, in trying to get them on the same agenda or year contracts as the other ones are. So I think that's what has happened this year. So they're only for a year this year, and then we'll renegotiate again. So,
If I may answer that last question, under South Hadley's budget, the town administrator has both an assistant town administrator who acts as the human resource director and an executive assistant.
we had toyed with that idea actually too, Pat. We had wanting to know if we needed an assistant / HR person, and then it ended up just going to HR at this point. How it ended. On my foot out the door.
I can tell you that oftentimes throughout the Commonwealth, the HR function is either a part of the assistant town administrator position, or it can be an additional job as well. Oftentimes that's a dual role.
Yeah. We do have an administrative secretary to the administrator, who is also the procurement officer and a licensing coordinator. So she also is in the administrator office area also. So I don't know what her exact, except administrative assistant at this point.
And just so that you don't get too overwhelmed, your job as a committee, it's not going to be deciding how to staff these offices. And it's more about where does the authority rest. And then the town, will be submitting their budget requests based on, what do we need for this? So we're not, I don't think that you should be too concerned about trying to figure out, who's going to be staffing these different, the executive branch, as much as where is the authority going to rest.
All right, what else do we need to touch on tonight, Pat? Where else are we moving forward for our next meeting?
So, I would love if you, if we go back to the memo that we talked about so far, we just kind of talked about briefly, maybe we can get through these other decision points so that we can hear your thoughts on them. And then, Mel can jump in when he has specific information. And it doesn't have to be, if you, in as much detail as the HR section was, but maybe we can just talk a little bit about these other decision points so you understand where you're going. The next point was board and committee appointing authority. So we talked about staff appointing and department head appointing. The next, in some towns, the administrator has more authority with respect to appointment to boards and committees, oftentimes with approval by the select board. So, we may want to get in a little more detail about how are your appointed boards formed? Who, obviously the select board has the appointing authority for many of these boards and committees, but we might want to talk a little bit about what the role of the town administrator is. Oftentimes they're moving more towards the town administrator really taking the lead in recruiting and finding and helping fill these roles. And then the select board is given kind of a thumbs up or thumbs down once the candidate is presented, rather than taking a look at all the candidates and making their decisions. Mel, I don't know if you have a little more insight into how it's done.
No, I think in all the cases, I think the select board that I looked at, the select board are the appointing authority for the boards and committees. And I find that is the case in many smaller communities. the select board, small communities, select board knows the folks who live in the community. It's in those larger communities that I think that the select board needs help to identify candidates. And so I'm not sure that that's an area that's a big one, but I would take your lead. If you find that the select board is spending too much time, or there's problems in filling committees, advisory boards and committees, then I think we can take a look at where the administrator might help. As simple as just keeping sort of an ongoing recruitment process where they're constantly recruiting for boards and committees, and keeping a database of people who are interested. That can be helpful. That's one area.
I think we just had, with the planning board, right, Bill, you can fill us in, you had
We had a
an opening.
we had a resignation on an elected board, which we filled jointly with we did interviews. We made a recommendation to a joint meeting of the select board and the planning board to fill that position until the next election.
Right, so the authority of that wasn't totally on the select board, it was joint because
It was
you're
joint,
elected.
and that's
official.
statutory. Filling a vacancy in an elected position requires
Select.
joint action of the select board and the affected board.
Okay.
You went through the same exercise with the Board of Health
Yeah.
when you had to
Hire,
bring in an appointment. One of the elected members
resign.
resigned, so you had to bring in someone else. And
Yeah, that's a statutory requirement for elected boards. I think what we're talking about are the appointed boards. Perhaps the Historical Commission, the Council on Aging, and those kind of committees.
That all comes like at an open meeting, they would say there are vacancies on such and such committee. If you're interested, please send your resume or your request to be on that committee to the select board. And then it would go from there. And then they would decide, how many applied. If only one or two applied, they would look at that person and then bring that back to the select board for approval. Where it probably could have just gone to the administrator and she could have made that decision.
Joyce, did you find that as a select board member, there's a disproportionate amount of time spent on appointing boards and committees?
I didn't feel like there was. I mean, I didn't think that it was that big of a deal, but other people feel like some of this could have been not taken up. I mean, maybe on a night where it went for 2 or 3 hours, people thought, well, we could have taken this or that off the agenda. But, other than that, no, I didn't find it that cumbersome.
One area perhaps the town administrator or their office could vet these applications, and so they might do a preliminary interview with these candidates and sort of summarize their qualifications, and then it might make the select board process a little bit more smoother and straightforward. So, for example, but those are areas that could or don't have to be in a charter. Those could be simply just a procedural process if the select board continues to make those appointments, which frankly I think in smaller communities is the norm.
Okay, so I mean, it sounds like we may not have to spend a lot of time on that, and that may be, if there's no issues, that may be, just incorporating the status quo into any document that we prepare. There are some issues, and Mel can probably discuss this in more detail. Things like contracting, collective bargaining. The question is this something that the select board is intimately involved in, writing, forming contracts for services or for collective bargaining? Or is this something that they want to delegate, in more detail to the town administrator? Do you have any experience with that?
We used to be involved with it up until the last contract, and then the administrator actually took the lead with the HR person that we had and did the negotiating and then brought back the contract for approval to the select board. So that changed from the beginning of time when we used to just sit down and negotiate over the table back and forth with the other side, whether it be DPW or the police. And, it would go from there, but now that changed the last contract. So that has taken a turn. And now I think with the HR being involved and directed that some of that will now go to the HR and the administrator to do the negotiation. What I'm assuming, I don't have that, that's what's gonna happen, but it would be interesting to know if that's what they're leaning towards at this point.
On the broader scale of contracting, there is a procurement officer. So if you want a new truck and you have the money to pay for it, so various things go out to bid, various things are excused from going out to bid, but the procurement officer handles that. And usually, if it's anything out of the ordinary, the town administrator forwards it to town council for comment and review. And so it really just comes to the select board as town meeting has approved buying a dump truck. This is the contract for buying it. It's been approved by town council. Stop by our office and sign it.
Yeah, and don't they include the treasurer too, Bill, in this?
Sometimes, yeah.
Yeah. So lots of times the treasurer is involved in it because she helps to set the budget at each town meeting. So that makes a difference also.
Who is your chief procurement officer, or who has been designated? Is there a particular staff person for that?
Jennifer James, who is also
Jennifer, yes.
administrative assistant.
The state has now a fairly detailed procurement law, very detailed. And it prescribes the manner of procurement. So if it's a certain level of expense, it requires bids. If it's a little less, it could require written quotes, and less, even more than just good business practices. And so a procurement officer who is trained and knows that will be able to handle that. But frequently it is listed in a bylaw. So let me just go down to we have a section on contract and procurement. So currently in the Hadley bylaw, it says the select board or chief procurement officer is authorized to enter into any contract for the exercise of the town's corporate powers. That's in your bylaws in chapter 86. In the South Hadley situation, it appears to me that the town administrator is given much more responsibility to actually approve the contracts, where it says the town administrator is responsible for procurement and purchasing of all supplies, materials, and equipment of the town, except the school committee. And that's listed in their special act. So again, I think you may be doing it the same way, or the chief procurement officer may be authorized, but it may be listed differently in the various bylaws or charter. I don't think the select board wants to get involved in purchasing office supplies or desk chairs or that, and then there's rolling stock trucks and snow plows and so on. And then there's, fairly large contracts, whether they're in, a sewer contract or a road contract or a bridge or things like that. And those are the things I think you have to look at. Many communities might divide the responsibilities by the size of the appropriation or the size of the contract. But as I said, the laws are very specific these days on the procurement of public goods and services, and that helps a little bit no matter who is responsible for it, because they have to follow the Chapter 30B state law.
I'm curious, as the procurement officer, one of the things that we might want to formalize is the procurement officer reports to the town administrator. I mean, according to the bylaw that you have, it's really unclear. Some, as Mel mentioned in these other towns, it's really the town administrator, the buck stops there with respect to the procurement, and they can designate a procurement officer to do this work. But I'm curious in your town if there's a clear, if the procurement officer goes right to the select board with the contracts, if there is a reporting structure to the town administrator first for their approval.
In this case, the procurement officer works for the town administrator. So there is that chain of command. Historically, the town administrator was the procurement officer.
David Nixon.
When our prior administrator retired, he made sure that Jennifer had taken the necessary courses to be certified as procurement officer in case the incoming town administrator did not already have that certification, and she did not. So Jennifer has been the constant. She has now worked for David Nixon, Carolyn Brennan, and Mike Mason as acting town administrator. But she was slotted into that position intentionally by David Nixon because he wanted to be sure that there would be a qualified person.
Agree.
One other thing I would mention is a lot of times certain products and services are covered under a so-called state bid. And sometimes the Commonwealth of Massachusetts issues procurements and extends the contract to any city or town that chooses to participate. And so when you are buying road salt or sand or some of those products, there's often a larger consortium or even all the way to the state that has the bid. And that's can be very useful for small towns who don't have the capacity to go out and write specifications for all of these products and services.
I think we have been doing that because of other projects too. What it's called, it's not coming to me, but we have been in conjunction with the school on certain materials and things like that to buy. And I think the same thing with salt and stuff too, that there is something that the DPW does to get in on a multiple buying with several towns. I can't think of what it's called, to tell you the truth.
Yeah, they're cooperative bids sometimes with other entities. Purchasing is very detailed, and as I said, there's a very detailed state law. I think the important thing, as Pat mentioned, is who's responsible, where does the buck stop? And in your case, it refers to a procurement officer, and that procurement officer is appointed by the town administrator or works for the town administrator, but that's not very clear in the bylaw.
Next.
Okay, some of these can be grouped together, but one of the things that we have left to talk about is budget preparation. And understanding the budget process, because that is really a significant, it's a significant job for the town administrator. But we would love to hear a little bit more about how it's done in your town.
Financial team, right? We have Linda.
Okay. So historically, by which I refer back to the prior town administrator, the administrator prepared the budget on his Excel worksheets that he had carefully cultivated over the years. As he approached his retirement and knowing that there was some uncertainty about who the next person was going to be, initially, he turned to the town treasurer, or perhaps I should say she volunteered her expertise to assist the town administrator in preparing the budget. The most recent town administrator, Carolyn Brennan, came in with no specific experience. She came up as a department head through municipal government and had no prior experience as an administrator. And in particular, she had no budget experience on a town-wide level. So she also turned to the town treasurer to assist her. This is work the town treasurer was doing on top of the normal functions of the job. Carolyn did initiate something she called the finance team, which was basically herself, the town treasurer, the town collector, and the chief assessor to get input on what was coming in, how well it was coming in, where it was going out. But through all the process, the town treasurer, who also was initially labeled the budget director or the budget manager, I forget, budget manager, basically took the lead on putting things together and getting the requests out to the boards. What are your needs? How does it all fit in? She also established the capital budget, works with the capital planning committee on the capital budget items, works with the finance committee on the regular budget items.
Probably CPA gets in there. somewhere,
She
too.
does work with CPA.
Does work with
CPA
Yeah.
is its own realm. They're not really part of the direct budget process. But she does keep, as treasurer, she keeps records of what they do. So that may or may not continue. The reason I know so much about this is my wife is the treasurer, so I live this.
I had an opportunity to also look at that a little bit there, the budget preparation. So interestingly, in Hadley, the bylaw reference says the town administrator compiles the annual budget and CIP for all town agencies and then submits to the select board and finance committee. Compiles is not a very strong word, whereas you'll see often, you'll see in the South Hadley example on the right, the town administrator prepares. Now that might be considered just some language, but I find that in a case where it's not clear, sometimes what happens is, a new town administrator comes in or finance committee wants to take more control of the budget or there. And so unless it's clear who actually is preparing the budget and submitting it, in South Hadley's case, it says it prepares and submits a balanced budget. So sometimes what happens is the town administrator will just take the school department budget and other budgets and just send them off to the select board and finance committee, but they're not balanced. So they're really not a budget per se. They're just budget requests. So that's something you want to think about. But this idea of a finance team is a very good one. And many town administrators use the benefit of all these different finance individuals to help put the budget together. But again, unless it's clear who's responsible, that can change depending on circumstances. And so that's why it's nice to have a little bit more clarity around the budget process. In your case, does the finance committee, do they make independent recommendations or take the budget and create their own sort of final budget and submit it to the town meeting, or how does that work?
They also work in conjunction with the treasurer, but they do take the budget, they meet with all of the departments. They look at the requests, they look at the bottom line, and look to see where the money's coming from. And they do make recommendations. By the time that it goes to town meeting, they have their recommendation 500 or 411 or whatever, not all of them all the time are in agreement. Majority, most of the time they are, but there are some times that they're not.
They make recommendations on the budget that is presented by the budget director operating in conjunction with the town administrator.
Good. Thank you.
Okay, so, as we mentioned, that may be something that you want to clarify. You want to clarify who is ultimately responsible and is preparing the budget rather than just collecting the budget requests and submitting them on. And it may be that your practice has evolved even where the language has not. So it looks like in some of these instances, your practices have evolved from the bylaw. And so you definitely want to clarify what's happening, what's happening on the ground now. I am, we've kind of gone through most of the decision points briefly. I guess I would encourage you, when we're able to meet with the town, when you're able to meet with the interim town administrator, when you're able to meet with the department heads, perhaps you can collect some concrete changes that you're interested in making, or at least, or even, understanding the procedures as they are and how you may want to formalize them.
Okay. Well, I'm gonna send an email out to him tomorrow to see if he can put in his book to be with us on the 19th. And maybe get some of these answers, that we're looking for. Would you be joining us that meeting?
I think, we can talk about whether that will be one of the meetings that you want us at or not. Because I know that, we have a limited a number of meetings that we're able to be with you. So let's meet, we'll meet with you, early next week. And then we can talk about that.
All right, Mel, you and I will.
Yeah, we can coordinate a meeting, Joyce. One of the things that, why don't we decide to meet? I do want to point out one thing. We can ask questions, or we can draft some questions for you, even if we're not available, where we think you need to get some clarity. I wanted to point out that in Hadley's bylaws, there's a large section on the police department, more than any other department. And in that section, the police chief is granted certain authority for a lot of these discretionary items for their department that we just talked about, property and contracting and things like that. I would encourage you to take a look at the police department bylaw. I believe it's section 174 of your bylaws. And I find it interesting that many of the things we're talking about have been clarified for the police department. And I'm not sure what the background is on that, but that level of detail, I think, is what we're suggesting needs to happen for the town administrator on behalf of other departments.
So you and I will meet maybe Tuesday. Would that be good?
I think Tuesday's fine.
Okay with you, Pat?
Yeah, I think Tuesday will be fine. The 10th.
3-4,
What time works for you?
3 or 4.
Yeah, 3 or 4. Mel, what works for you?
Tuesday's fine. Yep. 3 or 4 is fine.
Should we just say 3?
Go 3.
Great.
And we'll set the agenda for the next meeting and hopefully get Mike here to answer some questions, and you can prepare some questions and send them to me. That would be great. Did anybody else have any other questions for Pat or Mel tonight? was their coming tonight a little bit helpful?
Mhm.
Sounds good.
I hope it was helpful for them too.
Yeah, was it good for you?
Very much. We really
Yeah.
appreciate that. All of the information we can get from you is really helpful. And, if you have anything you want to share in the meantime, you can get that to your chair, and your chair can send us any additional information you think might be helpful for us.
I have just a general question in terms of South Hadley, with the changes that they've made and the role of the administrator and the select board and their charter. Have things gone well for Hadley, South Hadley? Are they pleased with the outcome and the way it's operating?
That's a good question, and it probably depends on who you ask. And but I would encourage you to ask. You must have colleagues in the town, and I think you should ask. It would be interesting to find out, for a select board member who may have served prior to the consolidation and afterwards, to see how it works and whether they're comfortable with the kind of decision their town administrator makes, or the work level that maybe has shifted. I mean, the idea really behind this sharing of administrative duties is to allow the select board to serve in more of a board of director type of a role, where they're are dealing more with the policy issues, the larger issues, coordinating between other elected boards, and that, rather than sort of the administrative functions of government, which tend to be, fairly mundane, around procurement and even hiring employees. I think that's the whole idea. But you really should ask South Hadley and people there how they viewed it. I'm not sure the special act on the date of that. I think it's about about maybe 10 years, Pat? Was it?
Yeah, I don't think it might be less than 10 years, but about 10 years.
It's approved in 2013.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I guess it's been 11 years now. So, which goes by in the blink of an eye, but, yeah, it's definitely a good idea, I would think, to talk to people and see how they've, approached that.
I'll tell you, in terms of a town administrator, I think your town administrator is looking to make a difference and have an efficient operation, and so you have to. I think you think about it from that point of view too. Now you've gone through some transition yourself, and it would be really useful to know, is it about form of government, or what, or are you able to recruit the kind of individuals that you'd like to, and does the form of government and the process of governing impact that? I would say it does to some degree. I know you're going through that process now, so it's kind of hard to tease that out right now, but that would be a question I would ask South Hadley. They recently hired a new town administrator, I'd say about 2 or 3 years ago, and wondering whether they felt that they're getting a good pool of candidates and qualified candidates for that job.
Okay. Sounds good.
Yep.
Thank you very much for coming. Appreciate it.
Okay, thank you.
Right. Good night. Roll call.
Good night.
Motion.
Before we close,
Oh,
I'd be willing to make a few phone calls to South Hadley if there's no objection on the board's.
it's fine with me.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's fine. So John's gonna call South Hadley.
A motion to adjourn?
Second. Roll call. John,
Aye.
Bill,
Yes.
me, yes. John,
Aye.
Sally, Mary,
Yes.